Imagine a city, a bustling, thriving, contemporary, multicultural city. A centre of trade and commerce, a city with great architecture and huge influence. This is what Paul found when he arrived in Ephesus. A city on the par with Rome or Corinth or Alexandria, a very influential city. When Paul arrived there, we read about it in Acts chapter 19, there were just 12 Christians, just 12. We read that Paul spent 2 years of his life preaching and teaching and building the church in Ephesus to the point where it had such a massive impact in the city that the culture itself began to change. In fact, such was the impact of the church in Ephesus that a massive riot started. The whole city was in uproar, it says, because so many people were becoming Christians, it was affecting the very culture and trade of the city. About 10 years later, whilst Paul is under house arrest in Rome, he writes a letter to this church in Ephesus. It's the letter to the Ephesians. We see it in the New Testament. It's one of the most amazing books in the Bible. John Stott says that no one can emerge from reading the book of Ephesians with a privatised view of the gospel because it's the gospel of the church. John Calvin said this was his favoured New Testament letter. Another commentator said that Ephesians is the crown of St. Paul's writings. Yet another says about this book, it is truth that sings, doctrine set to music. There are just 6 chapters in the book of Ephesians. Every verse is packed full with content and truth. Like an espresso, it's short but very, very rich. In January 2011, we at the Kings Church Midsussex on our Sunday mornings are going to start digging deep into the book of Ephesians. The first half of Ephesians, the first few chapters, paint glorious pictures of the gospel. We will explore what it means to have every spiritual blessing in Christ. We will tackle difficult theological issues such as predestination. We will examine Paul's amazing prayers for the church in Ephesus. We will look again at the gospel beautifully distilled for us in chapter 2. And then we'll look at Paul's incredible vision of the local church, how it's God's new society bringing reconciliation, how it's God's new temple where he dwells by his presence, how in fact the church is meant to actually display the very wisdom and glory of God. So having explored these amazing big themes of the gospel in the first half of the book, Paul then gets really practical, explaining to us what it actually looks like to live a life worthy of this calling. We'll look at unity. How do we actually keep unity? We'll look at how the church grows and matures as we each play our part in it. We'll get into the very nitty-gritty areas of life like marriage and parenting and work, and then we'll finish by exploring how do we actually live in the battle that we're called to as Christians. Ephesians is an incredible book. We will be transformed as we study it together. Join us at the Kings Church Midsussex. Starting on the 23rd of January 2011, we are going to spend the spring and summer terms delving deep into this book. We will be moved to wonder and worship at God again as we study the letter to the Ephesians.